Hi, this is Pat Moorhead with More Insights and Strategy, and we are here for another FinTech Friday with episode 2, and I'm here with senior analyst and practice lead Melody Brew. Melody, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm just getting ready for our boiling heat to start here in Austin, Texas. You know, we only have a few seasons, and I've actually really enjoyed kind of April and May, which is kind of like other people's summers, you know?
Yeah, I know. I was just looking at the forecast. It's like 97 for the next 10 days straight, which actually isn't so bad since the last 10 days we had rain.
Exactly. And it's not 100, so it's only double digits, not triple digits. So that's a score in my book.
Yeah, that's coming though. It'll be soon.
So hey, we have a full show, and we got a lot of great feedback last time. Some great comments, some kudos, some hey, why don't you look at this? But we're going to talk about diversity in fintech or lack thereof. We're going to talk about DeSPACs and IPOs. We're going to talk about fintech as a change agent, and we're going to have an acronym of the week. We're going to talk about NFTs. So with that, let's dive right into fintech and diversity. Melody, we had received some feedback on diversity from the last podcast and the issue of women being left behind. And wow, you are a woman, and we want to hear what you have seen and what you're hearing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we got some great feedback about the fact that we talked about the diversity issue, just in general in fintech. And I think from VCs that they're paying attention to that there are some particular VCs out there that are funding companies that are embracing diversity, and that is something that's so important, that they're seeing better outcomes when they're embracing diversity. And I think a lot of times when we talk about diversity, we talk less about gender than I think we should be talking about, especially when it comes to fintech. And this article was brought to my attention in Bloomberg, and some stats that are brought up in the article that, in particular, like Robinhood, the trading app, women make up roughly 30% of its active customers. And some of the other things that brought up in there, that women own fewer assets than men, are less likely to invest in higher yield assets like equities. Women are more risk averse, so maybe regulation could play a key role in making women more comfortable in, using some of these fintech products. I think really, obviously we're not going to solve this issue right now. I think it's just important to talk about it, to be part of the conversation. One of the things that I think is really important is to have more women in leadership and development roles in fintech. There are certainly some really strong, smart, badass women in fintech, but obviously there aren't enough. And I think, over the past, 10 plus years, we've seen such a concentration in education on STEM, and probably not enough on financial literacy in general. When it comes to, raising strong women, you're a girl dad,
I totally am. And it takes effort. I mean, it does. And I am blessed to have two badass daughters and a badass wife. So I don't think we know any other thing. And part of it is how you're brought up. And I think the other part is opportunity and getting in there. How much of an issue is it that so many of these companies are run by men? Is that a factor?
I think that is a factor. When inherently you're just going to build for what you know. And unless you have a board and advisors and developers and customers who are really kind of drilling that in, that these are products and services that you have to build for, not just, kind of, again, what you know, if you're not really thinking about that, if that's not really at the forefront of your mind, and those aren't your customers. So say like Robinhood, for example, 30% of their customers are women. If they're not getting feedback constantly from women of this is what we want to see, this is what we want to use, if they don't have a diverse workforce, they may not be getting the kind of feedback that they need. So I think it's important that, that we speak out about it, that that they get the feedback from women, and again, that we start them young, that we start like teaching girls and women that they can have a place in the financial community, that it's not a scary place to be. That, you know, I mean, my dad was a CFO, and so I was raised talking about money, this wasn't like a scary place for me ever. But, you know, like you said, you're really fortunate. You've got these badass daughters who are being raised around it. I was raised around it, but we have to remember that not everybody is. So I think leadership roles, and I think as we talked about last week or on our last episode, when VCs are looking at placing women in leadership roles or investing in companies led by women, that this is an important thing to take a look at and see, make sure that they're looking at how do we make sure that women aren't being left behind in this, you know, fintech boom, that 30% isn't enough.
Yeah, and I love you bringing this up, and listen, I want my company to be more diverse, and I haven't knocked that out of the park very well. You know, I skew experienced. I think the average age in the company is 50, and when you put that as I hire ex tech executives, there's a certain makeup, and it is tough. And you know, it's funny. I do take it for granted what I come from, and you know, I very much came from a matriarchy. My mom worked 3 jobs, and she was a hard ass. Okay, my wife runs her own business, and I have 2 daughters who are NCAA athletes, and they just kick butt all day long. And sometimes I do take for granted the opportunities that they've been provided, and that not everybody has that environment. I do think we need 100% more women in tech. We need more opportunities around that, and I think we have an incomplete industry, an incomplete value proposition and offerings when we don't have enough diversity, and that goes for gender, that goes for sex. I think that goes for color of the skin. I think that goes for everything. And I do appreciate you bringing that up. And let's not have this be just a kind of one and done. I want to focus on what can we do about it, because I really do think this is important.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think, you know, it's across the board. It's not obviously just in fintech; it's everywhere. And I think, you know, one thing, you know, maybe what we should do is highlight some of the companies that are doing it right, and that's, you know, one.
I think it'd be a great idea, and we can even have them on the show and ask them how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that's a great idea. I think maybe a show or two down the road, we should have a guest on, and we can talk about that and see if we can spread the wealth a little.
Yeah, sure.
Good conversation here. Let's go to our next topic here. So I'm being a little provocative here, calling it a DeSPAC. You know, it seemed like for a while, about 18 months, we had a run where SPACs were huge. Everybody's going to make a killing on them. You know, my favorite podcast is the All In with Chamath and company, and he is viewed as Mr. SPAC. And he's even advocating for more regulation. And then we have a few IPOs. So a couple deals that have been going down. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, actually, the last couple of weeks, there were some really big ones. A couple that we talked about on the last one. And I know, you know, our general disclaimer, this is not investment advice. Although a couple that we called out, a couple that we called out as the good ones had really great debuts. Sofi being one of them. They came out, let's see, June 1st. They officially went public, jumped 12% in their first day of trading. Just this week, then they announced that they were partnering with the same group of blank check companies. Will begin offering IPO shares on their platform, up to 5% of the IPO offerings of those companies when they do their IPOs. So that's an interesting add-on to their platform. Another one, which was also a DeSPAC, Katapult, wasn't as huge as, you know, some of these other ones. These like massive valuations. They actually went down about 6%. Katapult is the kind of buy now, pay later option for subprime. A little bit surprising that it wasn't like such a huge kind of debut, just given that the company has been profitable, and the everything from, you know, the original announcement that they were going through the merger had been pretty positive. I spoke to the CEO today. He's happy with how everything's going, and they've got some good plans. And really, they're kind of the only player in that subprime market. So not really worried about what that's going to look like down the road, but it wasn't, you know, some big, massive, you know, jump in the market. And then Marqueta, which is payment service provider, that one was huge. They went up 20% in their debut. They up to, I think that their market cap is 17 billion. Their last market valuation was 4.3 billion as of last year. So I think what's happening with, you know, a lot of these fintechs going public is they had such a massive chance to kind of show their value over the pandemic. So many people were shopping at home. All of these like services on demand were being used because people were at home, people were stuck. So Marqueta in particular, they create cards, you know, credit card-like payment options for, or payment services for like DoorDash and Uber and others. So like when your Instacart shopper goes to the store to purchase your groceries, they use that card. Marqueta produces that card for them to use as the payment option to buy your groceries at the store. So they actually chose to go a traditional route of IPO rather than a SPAC. And I find that kind of, you know, interesting because the CEO has been quoted a couple of times in various articles over the week and interviews over the week saying that they made it a point to go a traditional route. So not a SPAC and kind of called that out, which I think was interesting. But yeah, I mean, they really just $17 billion.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do you agree with Chamath that SPACs need to be regulated more? And it's interesting coming from the king of SPACs himself.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, you know, we talked a little bit about this before. I think if not, we're going to get into the same thing where every celebrity has one that, you know, it starts to get silly. And really, obviously, regulation exists for a purpose. And once the merger happens, then of course the SEC steps in and they have these reporting structures that every other public company has. But there's still some market fluctuation that happens before, when the pipe happens, when the warrants are issued, and you're still playing with people's money, and there's very little regulation around what you can say, what you have to report. And if you can just, you know, anyone can decide that they want to have a SPAC, you can get into some trouble there. And like, you know, like I mentioned before, it's sort of like the initial coin offerings of, you know, 2017, 2018. There just were too many that people got sucked into, and, you know, again, every celebrity had one, and a lot of people lost money on that. So there is a reason why the regulation exists, and it's worked for many years. And I think some pulling back on this and having some regulation around it is better. And again, you know, even going back to like what we were talking about, you know, with women investing, women are more risk averse. And when there's regulation surrounding things, maybe they feel a little bit safer to invest in something. So if that brings, you know, more women into the fold of feeling safe in an investment, then, you know, that's another plus for me.
Yeah, so some of the massive valuations, like with Marqueta, is really based on the fundamental premise that they're going to replace or chip away at the legacy financial institutions. And fintechs aren't just making waves on Wall Street. I mean, they're prompting some of these legacy folks to really make huge changes in how they serve their customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really good thing. I mean, I think anytime you have some pressure where the consumer wins is a good thing, and we're seeing that a lot in fintech. I think earlier when Robinhood and other no fee trading apps really started to take hold, we saw banks or trading apps or trading banks like Schwab and TD Ameritrade eliminating their trading fees because they had to compete with these trading apps. So I think like the same thing happened I think it was last week. Ally decided to eliminate their overdraft fees. There were a couple of other banks that put a pause on overdraft fees during the pandemic. But Ally, I think, is the first one to actually come out and say, we're going to put an end to this. And really, when you think about it, it's actually a really easy thing for banks to do. Although it makes them a ton of revenue, it doesn't cost them very much to do at all. Right. And when you think about the fact that, somebody is being penalized for not having any money in their bank account by taking more money from them, it's absolutely ridiculous. But when you look at all of these other challenger banks like Chime and others that don't charge any fees, and actually some of them who even look at your balance and say, we see you're running low, would you like an advance? We see your paycheck is coming, would you like an advance? That's so much more consumer friendly. So why would anyone choose to stay with one of these legacy banks when they're being punished and hand slapped and taken from when
Right.
they have these fintech options who are actually trying to help them and help them to build wealth, not take more from them. So I love it. I love the fact that these fintech companies are putting pressure on banks to do the right thing. And again, yes, they are huge revenue makers for the banks, but it actually doesn't cost them that much to float that money for, most of the time. I think it's 30 days that somebody at the most that somebody might be short that money. Usually it's just the next paycheck. So
yeah, we take the contra view here, just to have a little fun here. So essentially, some of these startups are using VC money, and it's not fake money, but they don't have to turn a profit, right? They can essentially lose money for years upon years. So essentially, they're losing money and using leverage from investors to get the major banks to make problems. And I can see some of these fintech startups just going out of business, and then what's left is traditional banks that are making no money or making very little money. Is that a good thing for the industry? Is that a bad thing for the industry?
Well, first of all, there may be some fintechs that go out of business. I think that maybe that's a good thing for the industry, that the good ones, the really good ones survive. And of course there are going to be some, like any startups, that aren't going to survive. Obviously there's some VCs who don't want to hear that because there are some that invest in the ones that might not survive, but not all of them are going to survive. The good ones are. But like I said, for the banks, like for Ally, it doesn't cost them that much to float that money for that customer. So although, yes, they may be losing out on that revenue, that the $35 that they charge every single time somebody has an overdraft, but it doesn't cost them that much. The bank is not going to go out of business.
Yeah, and I can't stand it. I mean, one of my kids comes in and comes in with an overdraft bill. There's been some conversation about, Uber losing money year over year and putting the taxi cabs out of business. Now, I love the fact that the taxi cabs have to actually be clean now, and they actually have to be nicer to you in New York City or some of the big cities. But then again, if Uber goes belly up or something like that, you wonder, what are we actually left with here? But I think net better competition is good, and these financial institutions do need to get better at customer service. They remind me way too much of government entities that really don't have a whole lot of competition. They aren't necessarily fighting for customers because, once you put your money into a bank, you just don't change. I mean, I'm wondering what would make me change from Bank of America. I don't know. Maybe something big, but it would have to be something. And once once I hook up to somebody else, I'm probably not leaving for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, that's, one of the other things that I think we'll see with a lot of these challenger banks is that with open banking, with all and permissioning data, it's a lot easier to change banks. So part of the reason why you're not changing banks is because it's a real pain in the butt.
It really is. And it's just so easy to get a credit card from that bank, even though it's the worst credit card I could probably get. They can they know how much I make because my check is coming in there, and they know what I buy and what I spend. They've got a perfect view of the best and the worst of Pat Moorhead.
Right. And really what a lot of these financial institutions, they don't want you to have too much of your data. They don't want you to have all of the holistic view of your data in one place, because then you can actually say, oh, I have better options over here.
Right.
So, there's a couple of things happening. One is where your direct deposit goes is kind of where you're stuck typically.
Right.
But now with companies like Plaid and with the open banking and you're permissioning your data, it's really a lot easier to change. And there's, so many incentives to make that change that people, where people are kind of, other banks are drawing customers in that way. If you, even something like the Cash App card, if you switch your direct deposit to that, you get like extra boosts on your Cash App card where you can, get $30 off of your grocery bill or 5% back of your purchases in Bitcoin, so there's all of these incentives. And, some people who have been at a bank for 20 something years may not be incentivized by something like that. But, when I'm talking to my daughter who's 23 years old, and she took a look at her Wells Fargo card and she's like, I'm not getting anything out of this. Right. I'm going to start to go look at some other things, so we talked through let's, look at these cards, look at what your benefits are, look at what, make sure that you're paying attention to what the effect is on your credit, all of that. So definitely the younger generation, like where you and I may, not want to go through the hassle of changing. We're not necessarily the, number one target of some of these fintechs, but where it makes sense for, a younger millennial user to change. They're not so married to something because they haven't been there for decades. And it's not as hard for them to make that change because they're not so tied in.
Yeah, their expectations are just higher. And I liken this to 15 years ago when we had the choice between FedEx and the U.S. Postal Service or UPS, right? That was kind of our generation version of that. And, the thought of having to go to the post office versus just sending a FedEx, we just got all into the exercise of doing FedEx every time. So let's go into our final discussion point of this, which is we have the acronym of a week. I hope we can do this, Melody, because more than any other swim lane at More Insights and Strategy, you even create new ones all the time. And the acronym of the week is NFT. This is all we have heard for about 3 weeks. What on earth is an NFT?
An NFT is a non-fungible token.
Oh, okay. So it's like Bitcoin then.
It is like Bitcoin, except for the non-fungible part is that it can't be changed. So like a Bitcoin can be exchanged, one Bitcoin can be exchanged for another and the value remains the same. A non-fungible token cannot be exchanged. So it's any sort of like digital art, videos of sports highlights, collectibles, virtual avatars, video games, music. I'm going to be honest, it's a little odd.
Well, what are they? So I heard somebody bragging that they bought a pixel of a photo that they actually don't own. But how does this work? Can you actually buy a pixel of a picture?
So you don't own the original art. You own the digital, and right. Sometimes just digital art, right? So the thing that I find like really interesting about this whole phenomenon is that you can own a clip of something that exists online, So you own the actual original of it, but somebody else can still download it and use it. But you kind of have like the bragging rights to have it. That you own the original of it, but other people can still view it and use it and all of those things. So
okay, so let's say I'm a big Superman fan, and somebody actually owns Superman's cape from the latest Superman hit, and then there's the photo of Superman's cape that that the studio may bring out. Do I own a pixel of it? Do I own a certain percentage of that digital right?
no, you would own it. I mean, if it's for sale, depends on if it's for sale, you would own the photo. So like say, you know, an artist. So the one thing I do like about NFTs, I find them odd, but what I do like about them is for artists, it gives them a way to sell their work in ways that they otherwise would not be able to. So artists can, you know, they have a market for their work, and if people are willing to pay for their work, then they have a place to sell it. There's also a sort of a programmable way to enable the artist to program something into, because it is a digital piece of art or collectible. It doesn't, I mean, it's not always art, I guess. It programs something into it so that anytime this particular collectible changes hands, then they also get compensated.
Oh yeah, that is the missing piece here, and there are a couple companies out there that I'm aware of who actually do that tracking, and they do that tracking on the blockchain.
Yes.
Which is pretty awesome. So there we have it. NFTs, pretty crazy. I am probably not going to jump in yet until I can adequately explain it to somebody like my broker. I feel like I'd rather do option trading as opposed to or buy Bitcoin as opposed to NFT. It's like, if you thought Bitcoin was risky, maybe it's NFT, but then again, NFT is actually related to something that's tangible as opposed to Bitcoin that has absolutely zero tangible value or gold value or something like this. But super interesting. So
yeah. It's also a really weird kind of unknown asset class at the moment that nobody really knows how it will be taxed yet. I mean, it's a collectible.
Okay.
So if you look at it as a collectible, it's going to be subject to capital gains tax. The IRS hasn't come out to say yet whether it will be subject to long-term capital gains tax the way that a stock will be. But also you pay for NFTs with cryptocurrency. So if the value of the cryptocurrency also goes up, you're going to be subject to tax on that as well. So the whole value exchange here is really sort of unknown at the moment. I think it's a total novelty. Again, I like it for artists. I like that artists have another way to sell their creations, especially now when there are less in-person physical ways to sell art. But as an investment, unless you just really love spending money on something that doesn't actually exist in the real world, I think it's a novelty.
Sounds like my 18-year-old son would be all over this, but we are at our time here, Melody. I'm always learning things on this show, and when you're an analyst, it's like you don't want to admit that you've learned something. But this is why we have swim lane owners here and practice leaders, and you are the FinTech practice leader, plus all things blockchain and most things regulated. So you heard it here first. What's on tap for next week, Melody? What are you up to? Are you attending any conferences? Aware of any law? Anything you could talk about?
I do have a conference next week, and I'm forgetting what it is.
I put you on the spot there. Don't worry about it. You don't need to share your calendar with thousands of people here. But I know we're always going to conferences, and there's always stuff going on. But anyways,
thing I can't remember what the topic is, but they always have actually really good speakers. And there's something that next week. Yeah,
sounds good. Well, thank you for your time. And for all those listening, if you like what you heard, press that subscribe button. Also, I will remind you, this is not for investment purposes. This is for educational and hopefully entertainment purposes only. Reach out to Melody and I on Twitter. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like, what you want to hear. If you have an acronym of the week you might want us to bring to the next show, let us know. So with that, have a wonderful weekend. And this is it for FinTech Friday.